You're listening to the T21 Podcast, brought to you by Down Syndrome Group of the Ozarks. Our mission is to bring life and wellness to families who are advocating towards a community of inclusion for individuals with Down syndrome. Hello and welcome to the T21 Podcast. My name is Chloe Jones and here with me is Amy Bullard.
Hello.
And a special guest that I'll introduce in just one moment. But here on the T21 Podcast, we explore topics that are relevant to the Down syndrome community in 21 minutes or less. And today we're going to be talking about behavior. But first, I just wanted to invite you to subscribe and like this podcast and share this to any of your friends or family that might like this topic as well. We want to get this information out to as many people as possible, and you can help us do that. Well, on to today's topic. Like I said, behavior. Today we have Katie Adams here with us today.
Hello.
You are a Board Certified Behavior Analyst.
Correct. Yes.
Love it.
BCBA for short. I always have to explain the letters when I tell someone I'm a BCBA.
A BCBA. Well,
Yes.
do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more? Talk about your background, maybe experience as well?
Absolutely. So I am a BCBA, currently working for the school system, Springfield Public Schools, as a BCBA. That's my title and position. Let's see where to begin. I started off as a paraprofessional in an autism classroom.
Which was at my high school.
First I started off as a para in middle school.
Yeah.
Almost there.
Yeah.
And then I got my teaching certification and I became a special education teacher at Hillcrest High School. And again, worked in a self-contained class there for students primarily with pretty significant behavioral and communication needs. And then from there, I've done a lot since then. I got to try to rush through it. I was a process coordinator for a short time for the schools. And then I worked for Missouri State University for a little bit. I worked in a different school district for a little bit as a BCBA. I was a clinical director at an early intervention autism clinic. And then I had my own son, my sweet little Arlo. And that just kind of shifted, everything in life as that does. And I wanted to get back to kind of a different schedule. So I joined the schools again and love my job.
Love it.
And she's worked the whole game at like littles to bigs. So
2-year-olds, 21,
right.
All in between.
You're an expert.
Yes, she is.
And that's why you're here.
Right.
Well, if you have a loved one or a student or an employee with Down syndrome, I'm sure you guys are experts yourselves on behavior and all things about it. But we really wanted to tackle some specific topics around behavior that we believe will not only be helpful to parents and family and caregivers or anyone that does want to hire someone with Down syndrome, just so you can better support our friends that have Down syndrome.
Perfect. So we know you do a lot with behavior, and we know that you are very well versed in all things. But as we see oftentimes with our individuals with Down syndrome, stubbornness is a big thing.
Yeah.
And so what are some things that our families, caregivers, teachers, friends, whoever, what are some things they can do to help with this?
Yeah. I think we see that across all developmental disability areas, but for sure have seen that in some of the individuals with Down syndrome that I've worked with. I think that I could talk about this for like 30 minutes, so I got to really hone in. I think one of the biggest things we can always do is find that special interest, right? I think sometimes we are so quick to overgeneralize and think that every kid should kind of fit into that cookie cutter box, even in our special education classrooms or even within the disability community. But I think we also have to really look at like that starting point, right? Like, what is this kiddo really, really interested in? What is their special interest? And simple, mundane tasks that to us might be like, come on, let's just get it over with. I know you can do it. We might need to create a little extra motivation to get that ball rolling. So whether it's something like, my kid will not hang their backpack up when they get to school. They drop it on the floor every day. We are trying so hard to get them to hang it up, and they just will not do it. If that kid loves Spider-Man, like, let's stick a Spider-Man picture on their backpack hook and be like, put your backpack on Spider-Man. Any way we can to like make it really creative, silly, fun, I think is one of the number one things that we can do. And then aside from that, I mean, in our ABA behavioral world, there's something we utilize too called behavior momentum and the high probability sequence. Meaning if you can kind of get a child, a young adult, an individual to start doing something that they prefer, that they like, some quick, easy tasks, and then you move on to maybe one of those non-preferred tasks, data shows that they're more likely to do it. So again, let's just use that same example of hanging up a backpack. Let's say on our walk into the classroom, that kid loves to dance, they love pizza, and so we're saying, what's your favorite kind of pizza? Pepperoni. Me too. Show me a dance move. Awesome. Hang up your backpack. So we do, a couple of quick, silly little things. We also call it like the snowball effect. Sometimes that is a strategy that I recommend to people that can help when those moments...
Because it kind of catches off guard.
Yep.
And we just go.
Absolutely. And you're building momentum already as you're going, right? The kid's like, oh yeah, I can do this. Oh yeah, this is cool. This is fun. And then you do that like, oh, okay, now we're doing this. And it's like, oh, okay.
All
yeah.
right.
So that's one strategy I recommend a lot too for some of those resistant
I love that strategy. I actually recently figured that out just by trial and error, working here. And he did not want to put his stuff on the hook. And so we'd be like, I have a list in the back that we have to get to, but we have to pass the hook to get there.
Yeah.
I'm like, the list is so fun, and there's a surprise at the end of the list. And so we're walking, I'm dancing down the hall, I'm like, hook is on the left. And then we keep dancing and we get to the list.
Absolutely.
So that has worked so well.
I love that.
I didn't even know, snowball effect.
Yeah, anything I think we can do to like make things creative and silly and fun. And I mean, I think we all agree, right? The end goal is that we will follow those directions and we will do those things when asked, but we have to really realize like, okay, we're just not there yet, and what are some fun creative ways we can do, like we can utilize to get to that point.
Well, there's so many obviously different ways of communication for people with developmental disabilities, even Down syndrome, sign language, AAC devices, all of that. What have you found strategies wise that has been most effective when working with students, particularly during moments of frustration?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that this is kind of like a double-edged sword here. I think that one of the most important things in those moments, especially of escalation, is keeping our language concise and short, but also still talking to our students, family members, learners, whoever it is that we're working with, talking to them normally, for lack of a better word.
Right.
I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves when I go into classrooms or in the clinical setting, and sometimes you hear like a very robotic voice, like put up backpack, hang on hook, things like that, or a baby voice. I think it's incredibly important to, one, always have in the back of your mind, we are talking to this individual like the individual that they are.
Right.
But also remembering that moments of escalation are not teaching moments. So my best advice for communication, especially in those escalated moments, is remembering that this is not a time to teach. This is not a time to teach. This is a time to calm, de-escalate, get this kiddo back to baseline. And usually the best way we can do that is just through modeling without expectation. That's, again, one of the biggest things that I think I do in my job now is coaching teachers, paras, staff. Hey, this kiddo might not respond to you in this moment. They are clearly very escalated, and I think that that's okay. We can use this moment to model, maybe on their AAC device. I'm mad. Leave me alone. Looks like you might want me to leave you alone. I'm going to come back in 5 minutes, or I'm going to step away for a minute. Using those opportunities to model, and I'll talk about modeling a ton today because that's something really important. But yeah, remembering, keeping language short, concise, talking to them like you would want to be talked to when you're frustrated, modeling language, and just remembering that right now is not necessarily a teaching moment, it's a de-escalation calming moment, and we can come back to the teaching once they're at a place where they're able to listen and take that in.
I watched her model because she had a student that was learning to use an AAC device to communicate, and she would go over and hand over a hand, help the student push those things, and then provide whatever that reward was at the end. So like it might be like, I want a sticker, and Katie gave her the sticker immediately because together they did that. And so I think that's huge. Like you have to show them what you're wanting. So with that, there's positive reinforcement in the back end of that. So how do you utilize positive reinforcement to reinforce that behavior?
Absolutely. So just to nerd out on my ABA behavioral science for a quick second, positive reinforcement in like the scientific definition basically means you are adding a stimulus which is going to increase the future likelihood of that behavior happening again, right? I think that sometimes people hear positive reinforcement and they think Skittles, M&Ms, stickers.
No.
And while sometimes that might be the case, that's not necessarily what it means. And so the biggest takeaway for me with positive reinforcement that I always want people to think about is, again, thinking about, I'm adding something because I want whatever behavior they just did to happen again and again and again. And what I love to see the most is I like for that thing that's added to be positive engagement. I think that is so undervalued and underutilized.
Yes.
I think, do I use tangibles? 100%, because we were meeting kids where they're at, right? If that is where a learner is at, 100%. I will do anything I need to meet them where they're at. But what's most important to me is the meaning behind giving them that Skittle. I'm not just giving them a Skittle saying, all right, great job for, saying you want help, bye. I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. That was so amazing how you asked for help. Oh my gosh, I hope you do that again in a minute. That was so awesome. You can have a Skittle, or whatever that might be. And we do try to steer away from edible reinforcers. That's just an example.
Right.
But making sure that the emotion and the engagement and the interaction and the relationship building is what's behind whatever tangible you're maybe utilizing. Right. Because we all agree, again, that the ultimate long-term goal is for our learners to be reinforced by social interaction, friends, family, the feelings that they get from making their friends and family happy, and those relationships. Yeah. So making sure that that's behind any type of positive reinforcement, tangible you might be using.
Right. And when I watched you do it with that specific student, you were making her ask for, I think it was free time. She was going to get free time to do something, and you were making her ask for that. And as soon as she did it, you gave it to her. And I think that's important to know, that you got to follow through with whatever it is that you're asking them to
100%. 100%. Yeah, and I think that the immediacy of it is what's really, really important too. Something I see sometimes too is people will be like, oh yeah, earlier you finished your work, good job, you can go take a break. And while that's still helpful, it's not nearly as meaningful as it is right in that moment, so that they can really make the connection between, oh, that behavior I just exhibited is what got me this thing that I really wanted. Right. So as quick as we can to get it between the actual behavior and whatever it is that they're wanting, the better.
Right. And then later you can delay that as we're growing, and the expectations are changing, right?
Yeah. And that's when we can teach waiting and tolerating, hey, I noticed you did that, but we're going to finish this first and then we can whatever.
Right. Yeah.
If I was wanting to tell parents, I was reading a book a while ago about behavior specifically for people with Down syndrome, and that was what you were talking about with nonverbal cues, or even verbal cues, but not just giving prizes, quote-unquote prizes. That is way more meaningful to them in terms of working with their behavior. So having those huge expressions, just maybe if you haven't tried that yet, wow, it is a game changer, because that's what they would love, and that's what I would want.
Absolutely.
Over a prize.
I say giving it Disney World. That's the phrase I always use when I'm training new staff, when I'm doing parent trainings, is I say, if this is the skill we are really focusing on, when they exhibit this skill, or even when they get close to exhibiting the skill, we are giving them Disney World. We are jumping up and down. We are making an absolute fool of ourselves. If that's what they're into.
Yeah,
some kids might be reinforced by us leaving them alone. But if that's what they like, then that's what we want to do. Give them Disney World, and our engagement and interaction with them is ideally, what the long-term goal is.
Yeah. Well, I've already learned so much just that we've talked so far, but when thinking about this podcast, the biggest thing I wanted to learn from you is, how do you handle learned helplessness? And when has there been a time in your experience where you've experienced that, and then how did you navigate that?
For sure. I think a lot of times, honestly, I feel like I see one of two extremes of that. I either see the learned helplessness, or I see where staff or parents are doing everything for them. We're not even really giving them the opportunity to try things on their own. Or I see the total opposite of it. I feel like we never really see the beautiful golden in the middle spot. But the other side of it, where it's no, they know better, they can do it. It's okay, well, we got to meet them in the middle a little bit here, and figure out where it's actually a skill deficit versus a motivation deficit. So I think that's one thing that's really important to look at first and foremost. Is this truly a can't do or a won't do, right? And that kind of goes back to that stubbornness aspect as well. But I promise this is related. It might sound like I'm getting a little off topic, but intermittent reinforcement is another phrase that we use a lot, and that's basically, I call it the slot machine reinforcement. So that's when we're just not consistent in how we respond to behavior, and I think a lot of times that's where learned helplessness comes from. If, let's say, moms and dads, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but let's say dad is like, no, I know they can do this, I'm riding it out, I know they can do it, I'm going to make them do it. But mom is saying, oh, come here, honey, I'll do it for you, I can do it. That's intermittent reinforcement. That kid is learning, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that strengthens the behavior, the negative behavior. So I do think that being consistent with our responding, first and foremost, is the most helpful. If parents, teachers, paras, whoever get on the same page of, hey, listen, we've established that this is not a can't do, this is a won't do. Here's our plan moving forward. We're all on the same page. We're going to be super consistent with how we respond. I think that that's number one, the most important. And then again, also so much of it boils back down to what it is that they're motivated by. Are they motivated by that social reinforcement? And a lot of times we underestimate the value of peers and peer modeling. So many of the learners with Down syndrome that I have worked with are super motivated by their peers, maybe peers that also have developmental disabilities or their neurotypical peers. And so sometimes if we've just established that they just won't do it, but we know they can, let's bring in some peers and have them amp them up. Let's have them model it and show them, you know, hey, I heard that you can do this. Show me. Let's do it. And again, giving them Disney World when they do it and really amping them up and giving them that social praise and reinforcement.
I love that. I love how you describe all of your strategies.
Oh,
they have
thank you.
slot machine, Disney World,
Right.
like
Oh my
writing them
God.
down.
I'm like, that's why people love slot machines. It's like you never know what you're going to get. You just keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. And that's what we see with behavior all the time. It's like, well, I'm going to wait you out because yesterday I waited you out for 42 minutes and you finally gave in. So today, keep pulling. I'm going to wait you out 66 minutes. And then tomorrow, 22. You just never know what you're going to get.
You don't.
But hopefully not to do that anymore.
Right. Right. Hopefully. So you've given us like a lot of strategies. And I think actually you've already answered this, but I'm going to ask it just for it to be a separate topic. But following directions the first time given falls along with stubbornness, it falls along with communication, it falls along with all of that. And so do you have a strategy or a phrase that you can get people to
You're
do
like,
that?
I got an addiction.
She's like, I got this. Roll it up. Let's go.
So, okay, shaping, again, is another ABA term, but we want to shape that behavior. And I think that sometimes it's easy for us in our minds to think, well, this is the long-term goal, right? I want them to follow the direction of like their bedtime routine. The first time I tell it, great. That for some kids might be, that's a long-term goal. Like we're not quite there yet. I know that that's very important. We want to get there. But we really got to look at those baby steps and shaping that behavior. And I would encourage parents, especially and teachers of littles, start silly and start small. Simon Says, great activity for learning how to follow directions. Really simple, silly little things. Like while you're eating, if you're eating the kid's favorite food and it's ice cream, it's take a big bite of ice cream. Oh, look at you following directions the first time I told you. You know, like there's so many ways that we can teach following directions that doesn't have to be aversive and negative of go brush your teeth, you know, go do your homework. Again, long-term goal, totally. We want our kids to be able to do those things. But just really scaling it back sometimes, thinking about, okay, we don't have that skill. How can I make that skill not super aversive? How can I make them want to follow directions and think that it's fun, and build it up that way? So I would say definitely starting small, shaping, baby steps, make it fun.
I love it.
I love all your phrases. Like I've known you for a lot of years and I feel like I have not heard any of this. So,
I can talk about this stuff for days.
Obviously, I've been hanging out with you when you've been working with kids, so I've been watching it in action and not hearing the why behind all of it.
We might need to do a part 2.
Right.
Or just include your cell phone number.
Right.
Yeah,
Parents can call.
I will.
Just
Phone,
kidding.
Email address, home address. My husband will love that.
Right.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah,
I know that we got a lot out of this, even as working with people with disabilities of all kinds for so many years, especially you. So we're still learning so many new things, so thank you. Yeah. And on the last several podcasts, we've asked our guests for in 30 seconds if you could do one takeaway to tell parents anything, caregivers, friends, family, whatever it is. What would you say to them?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had time to prep for this.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I think I would just ultimately say that there's so many ways that we can make behavior fun, and that sounds like a really silly thing to say because most people are like, behavior and fun don't ever go together. Right. But I think that there's so many ways we can get creative with it. So I think that's my piece of advice. If you're struggling with it, reach out to somebody that you know and just say, here's my skill that we are really struggling with. I need to get creative with it. How can I make this fun? And get their buy-in ultimately, and then go from there. But sometimes we got to really return to baseline, start back at square one, and figure out how to make this not the most terrible thing ever to this learner, and shape it up.
Yeah. Shape it up.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we are so excited to see you guys next month. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
If you would like to learn more about Upside Down Mercantile, you can go to shopupsidedown.com or visit us on Commercial Street in Springfield, Missouri. If you have a topic you'd like to know more about, you can email them to info@dsgo.life.